Hello and welcome to Silence, a podcast where women get really honest about surviving and thriving in what often feels like a man's world. My guests are wonder women from the fields of science, technology, engineering and mathematics, or STEM, where inclusivity and diversity can be a real problem. I know this only too well as a female Southeast Asian mechanical engineer. I'm kind of a minority within a minority. I'm Dr. Shini Somara, an engineer turned broadcaster. Throughout my career, I've worked on and reported on some cutting-edge technology and innovation. And through my television work, I've met some incredibly inspiring women from a diverse range of STEM fields. Talking to these exceptional ladies has often left me feeling empowered and hopeful and excited about life. I believe silence will enrich you too. Every week, a woman in STEM shares her unique experiences with absolutely no pressure in having to promote her accomplishments or guard her impressive reputation. Because I've come to realise that everyone is just way more open and relaxed when they're anonymous. So I deliberately disguise my guest voices so that we're just connecting as human beings rather than human doings. It's my hope that you really relate to what we chat about today. If so, please do subscribe to Silence and maybe even rate and review the show. I'd love to have your feedback. This week, my guest is in the field of software engineering. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
No worries. I'm glad to finally be on the show. It's been a while, so
yeah. We've been organising this for a while, and for some reason, it's just timing-wise, it's been really tricky. Is that because your job is super demanding of your time? Because I know mine is.
I recently had a job change, but I also run my passion project, and then summer happened, so there's just been lots of stuff going on. So I've been quite busy. But yeah, I recently had a job change from I would say like a small corporation, and now I'm working for a startup.
Oh, wow. Okay. So why did you make the switch?
I think I was just looking for more of a challenge and the opportunity to really like build a product from scratch. And this startup that I'm working at, it's solving a really interesting problem, which is kind of aimed at women specifically. So it was just like, the opportunity to kind of join something at such an early stage was something I couldn't say no to.
Yeah. And was it always your dream to be doing what you're doing?
I would say, yes, yeah. I think for a while now, it's been my dream. I think initially, when I first started and realizing that I liked the sciences, I wanted to be a neurosurgeon. And then I had a biology class and I discovered that I was very squeamish. So I ended up changing I ended up changing my path along the computer science route because I just loved like working with websites and doing all that stuff in my spare time. So yeah, it's been a journey of its own.
Right. I mean, ones and zeros is far less messy. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you would think, but sometimes, sometimes, yeah, it can get quite complex.
Yeah, my gosh. I mean, I've just been doing a piece on quantum computing and gosh, I mean, it's just such a minefield. I'm
Yeah.
guessing you got into this because you've always been strong at the sciences then.
Yeah, I think I also had a teacher at earlier age during A levels, and his class was really fun. So I think it was also like educating us, but like having that fun aspect and seeing how that could be applied to like real world problems was something that really like stuck with me. And currently, I work in software engineering as a broad term, but specifically related to app development. So around the time I got into this industry, that was when the rise of apps were happening.
Perfect.
So it was just like perfect timing, and yeah, it's like everyone had apps in their hands, and we're getting these nice smartphones. So it was like, yeah, now or never, really.
And what's it been like, for you climbing, making that climb through your career?
It's been interesting. I've worked with with lots of different kinds of people. At this point, I'm a senior engineer, so um, yeah, it's been there've been like mostly ups, but there have been some downs and some things I did not expect along the way. My last job, I was one of about 13 engineers on the team and the only woman on the team. So that was very interesting. And my previous job to that, I was one of four and the only woman on the team. So it's been a journey of its own. Like it's been quite fun, and I've had lots of really cool opportunities along the way.
Okay, so like, what has it actually been like being the only female?
It really depends. In some cases, I found that the guys I was working with, they always wanted to kind of tiptoe around
Mm,
me and just kind of make sure that they weren't doing anything that would kind of, piss me off, or they're trying to be really PC sometimes. In other cases, people have just been, themselves and just been encouraging. And I've also received like mentorship from some really good technologists along the way, but I would say I've always had to kind of fight for myself, and I would say I've always had to kind of fight more than the other boys on the
mm,
team. Always trying to be
yeah.
assertive. I'm quite assertive in any like in general, I would say. And sometimes that has not been received positively.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been hard like navigating some of that. I think earlier on I've had people talk down to me, kind of like talking in the sense where it's like a senior engineer at the time like talking down to me like I was a child at work, and having that happen for quite a period of time, and yeah, just kind of gaining the confidence to actually speak back in those kind of situations. So it's yeah, mixed reviews. Really depends on the.
I've been, I was just chatting with a friend about this, about the fight. And it's, it's a really interesting topic because I feel as a woman in a male dominated world that I'm always having to fight. And I just find the whole thing really exhausting. Well, how do you deal with it? Like, you know, do you have any sort of like pearls of wisdom? Because, does it really, does being female mean that you're constantly having to defend yourself? Or am I getting something wrong?
Yeah, unfortunately, in most cases, it does because I mean, you're kind of depending on the field you're in as well. You're kind of challenging, you know, what's seen as normal and conventional. So it it, it almost seems like you're kind of representing the whole race, in that sense. And
Mm,
I think also like as a black woman as well, I've also like been in situations where I've also had to, fight in regards to my blackness and in regards to people seeing that, I was like qualified enough for a position.
mm,
One of the companies I worked at, I remember vividly that most of the women that were hired at like a level below their current working level. And getting to that next step in terms of like gaining a promotion, there's always that fight. So I think for me, I've just been used to that fight, and it's just one of those things of like I don't really think about it anymore. For me, that fight, it's always from a case of comfort. So in the case where I had someone talking down to me, it was more about my comfort and me just trying to feel safe
mm,
in that position.
right.
So I
As
think
opposed to
that's one
what?
of the things that, yeah, yeah. As opposed to coming to work every day and feeling um, horrible about the environment I was working in
Right, right.
and not putting my best into the
Mm,
position. So if it gets to that point where it's starting to affect your well-being,
mm.
then you just have to deal with kind of speaking up and defending yourself ultimately.
Yeah, because I've often questioned whether I'm just a really stubborn person that always has to be right. Um, because sometimes I ask myself, like, why am I having to always defend myself? Why am I always having to fight? And I think it's really just because I don't want to be a doormat.
Yeah, yeah,
And so I find that it's a really fine balance between not wanting to be a doormat, but also not wanting to be constantly antagonistic.
Yeah, yeah. I think
It's not an easy balance.
yeah, it's not an easy balance, definitely. I think things in relation to tone as well. I find that
Mm,
the so if I speak to people in a certain way, it's automatically bossy, bitchy, those kind of terms I use.
right.
So in order for me to like successfully navigate like this dynamic and so on, I've had to really choose my words carefully, and and always like having to like phrase what I want to say and practice that before I say it in certain situations, because then people
Mm,
can kind of turn this back on you and kind of point at you like you're the crazy person. But I was lucky enough to also have some male team members who also kind of were able to see that I was right in certain cases and backing me up. So having allies is something that's really important in this fight, and you only have allies when you try and like form stronger relationships with your colleagues, and having that and like breaking that professional boundary and having more like personal conversations. That's one way in which I've been able to kind of establish some allies in the work
right.
environment.
So I guess to sort of like go beyond the professional relationship, you have to really trust people, right? We can't go
Mm,
around sort of having intimate conversations with just anyone.
yeah.
Um, so has that been by overstepping professional lines, has that been your way of creating a support network?
I wouldn't say like yeah, overstepping professional lines, but not getting too personal, but just more about trying to connect on something that's
Mm,
not related to coding. So that could be maybe going out for a beer with colleagues and getting to know people's backgrounds. That has definitely helped me in some ways.
mm, yeah. I mean, I have really I don't have the answers. I've just spent many years trying to gain experience of how to carry myself in the workplace. Because, I think
Mm,
when I was first starting out, I didn't really have much self-confidence. I mean, it's difficult too when you're, at the beginning of your career, you don't, have polished skills, you don't everything feels really unfamiliar. Um, what would you tell your younger self, you know, who's just starting out? Like, how would you protect your younger self from the experiences that are ahead of you looking back?
well, I'm gonna sound negative now, but I don't think I can protect my younger self. I think everyone's going to have to go through some kind of struggle
Mm,
to get to that point, and that's the way the industry
yeah,
is, and hopefully the industry will change with time. But one thing I can tell my younger self is to seek out more
yeah.
mentors. Um, Luckily, when I was starting my career, there was another lady in a VP position. So having someone like that as a mentor, although they were living in a different um, country, that was really helpful. So seeking out mentors is one thing I would have spent a bit more time doing, but also just kind of knowing that things will be hard in the beginning, but also being able to just persevere through stuff, and also going out there and meeting other people like you. So I didn't start going to meetups and engaging in a lot of like women in tech initiatives until maybe around the second or like 2.5 years
Mm,
into my career, and I probably spent a bit more time doing that prior to yeah, prior to that timeline. And I think having that group of women who I wasn't working with or working at
mm,
different companies, and having that pot of people to just kind of pick from and meet up and discuss, that was
mm.
really helpful. So that's why I my younger self.
Right. I mean, what are women like in your industry? Are they supportive generally, or what's the vibe?
Yeah, it's very supportive. It's not really competitive in any way that, it turns into a kind of negative thing. Think it's always especially in the app development sector, it's very difficult to find, maybe another Android engineer or another iOS engineer. So when we do like come across each other and kind of realize, oh, we do the same thing, it's a
Mm,
really nice feeling. So there's definitely like communities out there, and it's just like over the years now that I'm kind of a senior position, everyone is just kind of seeing how their careers have evolved, and it's like
mm,
it's really a beautiful thing. We do have like
yeah.
some secret groups that that we often like just kind of express, still like vent about things that we're going through at the senior level, and yeah, kind of
Mm.
talking about life as well. So it's definitely a very like
It sounds like you
supportive
were a
environment.
minority in a minority as well, being female and being black. Um, what kept you going
Yeah.
with your career?
What kept me going is just the fact that I'm a very ambitious person, and I just like to prove people wrong. So if you say I can't do something, then I'm I'm gonna get that done, and I'm probably gonna get that done much better than you anticipate. So I think
Mm,
just having that fire, which sounds quite cliche, but just having that fire is just something that kept me going. Also, I haven't always lived in the UK. I actually moved here. I wouldn't say from where, because then I would just be like,
identifying
you
yourself.
know,
Yeah.
giving up everything. Yeah, yeah, I'll just be yeah. And I actually moved from another country, did my A levels here and my university here, and where I come from, there's real struggle. So, just having the opportunity to be here is, and
Mm,
just being able to kind of chase your dreams in a way where you can be paid at a level that's
mm,
incomparable to kind of where you are from, and you can also support people. I guess that has also like pushed me
right.
to succeed. Also, I was lucky enough to work with a very big company initially, and I got several chances to go out to Silicon Valley.
Oh, wow.
So that really opened up my eyes to the whole tech sector and just kind of what
Mm,
could be achieved if I did things in a certain way. And it was just very, it was, yeah, looking back, those were some
mm,
really good opportunities at that
yeah.
level.
So I
Yeah.
guess you have this inbuilt sort of gratitude for the opportunities that have come your way as a result of moving from your origin.
Yeah.
Um, it's so important, isn't it, to
Yeah.
have gratitude?
Yeah, definitely. I think, we're all humans at the end of the day. And it's yeah, it's just one of those things. It's just more of a feeling like you always want to, make people proud and just represent yourself in the best way. And I think you can look at certain situations and compare yourself to that, and then you see like, oh,
Mm,
I'm in a much better position than that. So like anything could go wrong, I think about this all the time. Like as someone that works with computers, it's like and is always like constantly typing or in front of a screen. It's like you have to also like take care of yourself. And now I have a habit of like taking like eye breaks whenever I'm coding, and not like
mm.
trying to not spending like the entire work day just in front of the screen. Just kind of, yeah, to take care of my personal well-being, because any of that could just go left, and you might you might not have that opportunity again.
Who were your role models growing up?
Role models. Let's see. There's quite a lot of people on that list. I
Yeah,
think definitely.
lucky you.
Yeah, yeah. I think definitely my mom is a role model. She's achieved a lot, and I would say people like Queen Latifah. That's one role model. Um, also say, let's see. Yeah, let's just say that mom and Queen Latifah. Those are two role models.
Why?
Not related to tech at all, but I think my mom
Yeah,
just yeah,
that's interesting.
yeah, not really. I think someone like Queen Latifah, just she's kind of navigated this world of hip hop, and then she went
Mm,
to acting, and then she went to productions, and then she also sings, and she's multifaceted in that sense, and she's really like
mm,
carved out a lane for herself, and kind of the trajectory of her career, just showing that you can do many things and you can do them well, and this idea of you having to do one thing is not necessarily the case. So like not
yeah.
limiting yourself to one thing, and yeah, it's just yeah, she's had an amazing journey. My mom, I would say, because she basically she used to work really long hours. She did a lot of really interesting journalist work back where I'm from, and just having to I can just imagine her having to navigate that industry with a family as well of several children isn't something that was easy. So there've been a lot of like really interesting like career decisions she's made. So looking
Mm.
back at that, that's just like someone who, yeah, just definitely going to be a role model for me.
It's interesting that she's not in tech,
She's not in tech.
because yeah, and it's interesting because you've chosen someone who, and I'm assuming your mum isn't in tech either, right? I
Mom
mean,
is not in tech at all.
right.
Not at all.
So two role models that are not in tech yet you went into tech. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, it's really encouraging that your role models had something beyond tech that inspired you to follow your own path.
Hmm.
Do you think it's important for women to have role models in tech or not necessarily?
I think within tech, it's great. But at the time, there was just no one who I could really see myself kind of fitting in that dynamic. Um, so it just happened that it was more of a character thing, and I had to really look at other people and really observe what they were doing and kind of say, oh, I really admire this person's character. I think it's important to have role models in tech. I think that's changing. There are a lot of engineers that I learned about along the way. There's a lady who is now an engineering manager at Twitter, but she was actually an Android engineer at Twitter and also Vine. And I think like her name is Sarah Hader. And I discovered these people later on, but this was just like an accidental thing. So I think now there are a lot more role models that are very like easily identifiable, and yeah, it's really important for people to have role models within tech. But at the time I started, no.
It sounds like you're one. You're a role model um, for young people considering a career in tech.
So, like, yeah.
I'm just so curious to know what was going through your mind when you were entering into a career that kind of had no roadmap.
Map.
Because if you were, uh, you know, if you were at that point in time when apps were starting to be a thing, and there you were with your skills of coding, you were basically taking a massive leap of faith into this industry.
Yeah, I mean, for me at that time, I wouldn't say I would say I had skills with of like I had skills related to coding. I was at university. I'll tell you the story. I was at university, and my dad gave me an Android phone, and at the time I was like, yeah, apps are hot. Let me just learn how to do it. It really came from a point of curiosity. I think that was
Mhm.
really the important, having that curiosity to just say, I really like this thing. I don't know how it works, and I want to like spend some time to figure it out. So the massive leap of faith for me was at university. I had a final year project to complete, and they gave like a list of projects that people could potentially do. And I told my lecturer at the time, I was like, like I've looked at this list of projects. It's really interesting, but really not my style. Can I just build an app? And I spent that year at university doing that. So it was all really from a place of curiosity, and I think that's what really sparked my interest at a younger age to even get into um, programming or coding and whatnot. It was curiosity around games.
Mm.
So I think that's what I would encourage people to always seek out if they are. trying to build this career. And if you have that curiosity
Mm.
and you always want to, constantly learn, then you will go a very long way.
Yeah. It's so funny because I grew up in an era where playing computer games was really frowned upon. It's like, get back to your studies. Don't waste your time with those games. But I've talked to a
Mhm.
couple of guests on Silence where they've talked about how games were such an escape and really one of their most influential influences into STEM.
Yeah, it's just like it's a portal of imagination. There's so much in there, like for me, I was always quite I would say I would say I'm an extroverted introvert.
Yeah.
But at that time, I was introvert, and just like sitting down and just having something that you could go to and just zone out in a
Yeah.
way, and also like express creativity and such. Um, yeah, it's just a massive world, and still I don't play games as much as I used
Mm.
to, but yeah, the industry is still thriving in that sense.
Yeah.
It just keeps growing,
Yeah.
growing and growing.
Especially with the introduction of like 5G soon, and gaming is going to take on a whole new era, I think.
There's so many opportunities there, even on mobile as well. Like before, it was mostly just consoles, and now yeah, Android phones, iOS. There's so many games out there. Like it's billion-dollar
Yeah,
industry,
it's
so
kind of exciting. It's
it's
definitely a
great.
world that has completely passed me by. I mean, I have not got into that at all. Still very old school in that sense. I'm just trying to imagine you as like a young girl. Do you reckon that women that go into STEM tend to be quite introverted generally?
I would say there's a stereotype with that,
Mm,
but I haven't like most of the women I've met. It's been a balance. It really depends. Think it might seem that way, but eventually there is like an outgoing part to the
mm,
puzzle. So I can't really say. I think I've met a mixture of women. I've met some who are outgoing, some who are
mm,
introverted. It just really depends, and it also depends on the roles as well. Because I find that maybe you're introverted, you go into this thing, and now I do stuff like public speaking, and I'm like I've just kind of gone on this journey of just like being able to do all these things I didn't really see myself doing initially. So that shell can really open up because as a woman in tech, you kind of discover, oh, it's only me. I have to speak up and like speak to this younger generation, which means I have to be visible. And again, that was kind of empowering me to go on a journey of, like heading into public
mm.
speaking and whatnot. So that changes according to where you are and how you feel and and what you feel your duty is to the community
Yeah,
generally.
yeah. I think it's really important for women to embrace their skills, because I think for a long time, women have almost been apologizing for example, being too deeply analytical, or
Hmm.
wanting to combine empathy with technical skills, or and I think we should be having more conversations that allow women to celebrate their combination of skills. So if they are introverted and want to kind of crawl into a mathematical cave, or you know they should be allowed to do that, and no one should frown upon them for that.
Yeah, definitely. I think because there are only a few women in the industry compared to the amount of men, there are all these different sectors or categories that you can kind of classify men in tech. And then with women in tech, either like, oh,
Mm,
she's too technical, she sits in a cave, or it's like she's not technical and she's just more of a figurehead that they're kind of using to
mm.
do marketing and stuff like that for the company. So I think yeah, the idea here is that women can be whatever they want, and I totally like support that, and I'm totally for that.
Yeah, and I think the more women who actually uh, are a living example of being who they are, then it gives other women permission to be who they are too. And we all need to sort of like raise our confidence level in just expressing ourselves. But I really do feel like women have to kind of stay underneath the stereotype and not break out of it. It's really tricky.
Yeah, it's tricky. I think that also depends on the leadership of the current company. So
Mm,
and the culture of the company that you work at. So like the company I work for right now, it's a startup, as I said, and currently it's 93% women, and the environment is
93%.
3% women, but it's basically a very early stage startup, and it's a product built by and for women, and the environment is totally different. That idea of coming in and openly talking about how you're feeling, whether it's like, oh, today I'm just, I'm on my period and I just need to like, relax for a bit, or just talking about things that you wouldn't necessarily talk about if there was, a room full of men. Like that
Mm.
environment is radically different, and it's it's way more chill, to be honest, and I'm really enjoying that more, I have to say. So yeah,
And I'm
more
assuming that you're as productive, if not more
as
productive.
productive, if not more productive,
Mm.
because there isn't a culture of just like go 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 go. People are
Yeah.
actually, you come in and someone asks you, how's your day? How's your day going? Because it's just like, yeah, and it's people are a bit more expressive. That's what I would say.
Mm.
I've really noticed that change in the dynamic, and there's a lot more like bonding in that sense. So,
I mean, I think male dominated environments tend to be so competitive to the point where you end up being a version of yourself that's fake.
hmm.
And I think your work environment now that you're working for a startup sounds like people can show up as their authentic selves.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can walk in there and you can be yourself. With regards to the competitiveness, the ironic thing about that is that sometimes like there's really nothing to compete for. It's just more of an ego trip, and then you just find yourself getting like warped into this,
Mm.
cycle. Um, for me, with that, it's tricky because you also want to seem like you are competing with everyone and you're pulling your weight. But yeah, at the same time, I found certain cases where I just couldn't cope with that, and I had to exclude myself from that. And yeah, I think mental health on the job is also really
Yeah.
important. So it just affects everything. It affects the quality of your work as well. I won't get into an argument with someone who is just kind of self obsessed with themselves, and I'd rather take a step back and kind of approach things in a different way. Um, but yeah, more women on teams is definitely like, yeah, it's definitely there's definitely a positive there.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to what we originally said at the beginning, which is like, knowing how to express yourself effectively because, you know, at the same time you want to defend yourself, but often I find that conflicts bubble up because it's often a battle of the ego or, you know, it's kind of like you're actually fighting with someone else's insecurities or, and so
Yeah,
it can just conflict generally just seems there's always an unhealthy agenda when it comes to conflict, I find. And so it can be tricky to navigate that because, on the one hand, you don't want to be trampled all over, but at the same time, you don't want to engage in petty, ego driven conflict.
yeah. For me, like relating to that, it's also about just like picking,
Mm,
what thing is worth fighting for. I found that sometimes people would just provoke me to try and get a rise out of me. So they would make me, look
mm,
like, you know, I was a problematic person. Um, but I think I remember a scenario, that something that used to happen generally. in terms of being a coder and in terms of code quality. So some of the more like senior engineers, they could get away with writing code that was not as clean. And they would present that code to the rest of the team, and the rest of the team would be like, yeah, that's not clean, and but yeah, it's fine because it's you and you're this, senior guy that everyone loves and everyone works with, and you make all these inappropriate jokes. But on the other hand, as someone who was more junior in that team and me kind of approaching my work every day and doing things in the best way that I could,
Mm,
I would
yeah.
my work would go through under a lot of scrutiny compared to that.
Mm,
In those cases, I just had to fight for myself in those cases, and I had to be prepared to have those awkward conversations of like, like there's nothing wrong with this, this is clean. There's tests everywhere,
yeah.
um, and so I think it's really about picking the fights. If you don't pick any fights, then you probably feel worse then. And if you pick too many fights, then yeah, it goes the other way as well.
I think also women in STEM um, are often so capable and so alpha female that often you're actually fighting with someone that feels less than.
Yeah, yeah,
Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes you're actually dealing with someone that is intimidated by you
yeah, definitely.
and putting you down as a result.
Yeah, I've had those situations firsthand. Um, I'll say another one because I guess this is the really nice thing about this podcast is you can just say whatever. I used to work with a guy on this really big team again, and we were both the same level, and we were both working together. We'd always sit together, do some pair programming together. We'd laugh, we'd go for drinks and everything. And I got promoted to the next level because we just it just showed that we were not on the same level in terms of the quality of our work. And then his behavior towards me changed overnight completely. It just went from, this person that was my friend to like, it just became a really toxic environment. So I've definitely like experienced that firsthand where someone is just like not happy for your progression.
Ah, right. So that was the problem then?
Yeah, that was the problem. It was just like it was jealousy, and it was also the fact that it was like, oh, I was on the same level as this girl, and and then the girl, she got promoted and I didn't get promoted, and it was just more of like that kind of dynamic that I felt,
Mm,
and having to go through that. It's just one of those things that it really opens your eyes about people,
yeah.
and that even though you might have a friend, and so when things go one way, not everyone's going to be happy for you. So it's just like politics within the workplace.
How do you deal with that? Because often we live in a world where we want to people please. I mean, if you look at social media, really the strength of it is based on how many likes you've got, how many followers. So we are living in a world where people pleasing is a priority almost.
Mm.
So when you are doing well and people are kind of envious and not really that happy for you, how does one cope with that? Because, you know, you don't want to be so successful that you end up having no friends.
So I think one thing is surrounding yourself with people who are kind of on that same adventure with you. So um
Mm,
like I have a very like strong network of like people in tech generally who are really like good at what they do, and kind of having that and not always trying to please everyone. But if people are at the same level, then there's going to be less of that because you're just trying to work together and build more exciting things together. That's the way I see
mm,
it. But at the same time, if I know someone's being intentionally nasty towards me, I just kill them with kindness. And it'll just kind of come across as, oh wow, you're really not going to get this girl down, even if you're trying to be nasty in any ways. So Also, negative energy is just something that I just don't have time for. There's so many things to do, so
Yeah.
many places to be. It's just not something that excites me at all. So, distancing myself from certain situations is something I've done, and like setting boundaries. Maybe in that case, we used to hang out, and now we don't hang out anymore, and that's fine because that energy does not suit my vibe, and
Mm.
it's just more of like doing things that are best for me.
Mm.
So people pleasing just has to stop at some point.
Yeah.
We're definitely, I love to, make my parents proud, make, like kind of approach things like that. But to what point? So there's a
Mm.
certain point where it has to have a balance,
Yeah.
definitely.
And I guess also having trust that there are people out there that see your vision. I think
Yeah.
often because women in STEM are such a minority, we stick out like sore thumbs. And if we're actually doing well in the process as well, like, you know, it can really, it can alienate us.
Hmm.
But it's having the faith to always just be the best version of yourself, knowing that at some point you're going to attract people that will really admire you, not admire you, but will really support you and be
Yeah.
in wonder of you rather than feeling like your success is a
Hmm.
commentary on their failures or something. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. It's really tricky as well because imposter syndrome is just something that just doesn't go away, even when you are having a really successful time. Because due to the lack of women in leadership positions and senior positions compared to men, it's always a case that when you do have maybe an event whereby you might want, some kind of representation in terms of women in tech, you might find yourself on a panel with someone who's got, maybe 10 years or 20 years more experience than you. So, like those in those kind of situations as well, it's also about, just having some kind of confidence within yourself and just trying. Yeah, I think as a woman in tech, you always have to understand that this, without everything you're doing now, is kind of, shaping the future, as cliche as that sounds. I mean, like this podcast now that you're doing, there are going to be other women who are starting their careers that listen to this, and it's going to be like, wow, there are all these exciting stories.
Mm,
So it's just a journey, I guess, that just keeps going and keeps going, and
mm,
hopefully one day it just lines up. Fingers crossed.
yeah. I'm gonna ask you, and because it's anonymous, thank God, it will be easier to
Yeah,
answer. But you know, have
yeah.
you felt downtrodden being black in tech?
That's a good question. I would say yes, definitely yes. I found that um, because of, yeah, black, and I'll just say African, most people had a perception of Africa and what Africa
Mm,
was and how Africans behaved, and I guess the kind of TV that people watch, I don't know, here in the UK in relation to Africa, it has not been positive. It's always about, the kids with the flies in their mouths and, people not having access to drinking water and
mm,
whatnot. Um, so I earlier on, even, at the lowest level, I always had that um, vibe and that perception from certain people that until, it kind of went into my background, and then it was like, oh wow, this and that. So it's like you're always shocking people by telling them about your
mm,
journey. People have, and I would say, like, coming from where I have come from, I do have a certain level of privilege even as a
mm,
black person, and that's something I've had to acknowledge because um I've also, like, I would say I identify as an African person simply. But some other people, based on where they grew up, they might say they're Black British. And there is a difference between the Black British and African experience. So there is a certain level of privilege that I do have in that area. And but what has generally happened is people always think I had the Black British experience, when in fact I did not. So they had a perception in their mind, and then I tell them certain things, and that changes. And yeah, it's been a tough one. I think it just kind of informs you of like how the wider world sees, you know, sees us, in that sense. And yeah, there,
Mm. What's the Black British experience?
by Black British, I mean, someone who's a descendant of maybe African or Caribbean parents, and basically grew up here. So, they went to school here. They're immersed by all that culture, and um, like in London, there's different areas of the African diaspora, as opposed to me growing up in a country where everyone looked like me, and
Mm.
everyone spoke the same language, looked like me, and there were actually no white people. So, racism
Yeah.
or all of that stuff, I didn't really experience it in that context directly until I moved to the UK.
Mm.
Um, I have had cases where, people have also tried to, I guess when you say black, people often put that par and par with the identity of being cool. So I've had people, try and like use the N word in a conversation, in a professional context, actually, surprisingly. And I've had to it's one of those things of picking fights as well. In those cases, I've had to call them
Mm.
out, and it's
Mm.
uncomfortable, but it's just one of those things that, you can't really tolerate. So
It's exhausting, isn't it?
it's exhausting. It's so exhausting. But I think, yeah, kind of moving to the UK, I was very naive about some things, and definitely after living here for, I think, what's been about maybe 11, 12 years now, my eyes have definitely opened to a lot of things that were not apparent before.
Mm. Do you walk around with a sense of feeling different, or are you someone who feels very confident in your own skin?
Oof, yeah, I think, yeah, that's always a journey. I haven't always been this confident. And yeah, but that's just kind of happened with time. So I think
Mm. Is it an age thing or a
more of an
experience?
experience thing. It's about, yeah, you get exhausted at some point, and you just say, well, I know who I am. And if people
Yeah.
in the world want to see me in a certain way, then that's their own cup of tea. I can't keep trying to, people please and change. Yeah, you just have to kind of be confident within. So that's always been a journey in itself. And yeah, I would say now I'm very like happy, positive, confident, but that was not always the case. There was a point where there was definitely a struggle of, fitting in and
Mm.
behaving in a certain way. And yeah,
Yeah.
really.
I must say, for me as well, like just getting older has just made it all easier because I care less about what people think.
Yeah.
Whereas when I was younger, I was like, oh, I've got to please everyone. And I was just like chasing my tail with that. And I got to a point where I was so exhausted of just trying to be accepted by society that I was just like, oh, screw it. Like, I'm just going to be me. And if I get stuff wrong, then so be it. But I think women in STEM, or maybe it's just me, but I have talked to other women in STEM who are such perfectionists and have such unrealistic expectations of themselves. And
Yeah.
they've kind of relaxed with age because they're just like, do you know what? I'm just okay as I am, you know?
Mm.
It's kind of a resignation with age.
Yeah. I think it's, yeah, because there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of energy in that dance, in you trying to, pretend to be someone else. And at some point, especially yeah, with age, I'm not like 30 yet, but I would say like I'm in my late 20s, and my early 20s,
Oh, wow.
I saw the world in a different way. And now in my late 20s, it's like, everyone's kind of, settling in, and there's less you really just start to understand socially how you fit into the world. So
Mm.
it's more of that for me, like, yeah, people are always going to feel like they need to do things, but um, there's a lot of energy, and I'd rather use that energy on something else.
Well, I must say, for someone that's not even 30 yet, you really are very, very wise for your age. It's quite amazing. I mean, what has brought you so much wisdom?
What has brought me so much wisdom? I don't know. I think I've just always been like that kind of person that's sat down and watched what was happening around them, and I've always had like older people, like mentors or just like family, and it's people always tell you about what they could have done when they were younger, and I guess I've just kind of learned from all of that and taken that um, as kind of my own template and trying to figure out how I want my life to be like. If that's not too deep to say. So it's more of that. It's just more of observing and yeah, I could be more carefree in some ways, but I don't really care,
We
to
can
be
all be
honest.
more of something else. There's always aspects of every single person that could be more of this and more of that, but you
Yeah.
sound like you're doing really well.
Um,
So, I mean, what's the plan?
what's the plan for me?
Yeah.
I definitely see myself running my own business in the future,
Mhm.
and perhaps also getting the idea to explore the world of remote living. Not forever, because I think that also has different implications in terms of personal life and stability. But I would definitely love to explore that world of people who are just like being digital nomads,
Mm.
maybe for a year.
Is that
But
because you want to travel?
yeah, yeah, exactly. Traveling and just staying in places for extended periods of time, and there are certain countries that fascinate me, and yeah, it's just like you got one life, so why not try and plan? I think it's all about planning towards that,
Mm.
and tech is a very like interesting industry to be in for that, because things will eventually move in that remote direction. That's already happening within the market. People are always um kind of giving out remote opportunities here
Mm.
and there. But I think the idea of running a business is exciting to me, because it just gives more
Yeah.
autonomy. And although there is a very like high stake there of you have to have all of that on your shoulders, it also gives you a lot of room to do other things. You might not necessarily. I enjoy working at a 9 to, or a 10 to 6
Mm.
for now, but in the future, why not try something different? So that's kind of how I see things panning out.
Mm. And it sounds like you're really immersed in a very female appreciative environment. And from other conversations I've had on silence, it sounds like female appreciative environments really allow for flexibility and, they really nurture true
Hmm.
talent.
Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, 100%, because we all know how it feels to be somewhere and maybe you need flexible time and you can't get
Mm.
that. So I'm very lucky to like work in a place currently where that's at the center of the culture, and work from home is not something that's frowned upon.
Mm.
Um, I think even with that, it's like when you're a woman and you enter the field, and you're not at that age or that time in your life when you want to settle down and maybe have a family, if you do want to. But when you do make that decision, the industry treats you differently. So kind of working with women who understand that and
Mm.
are building an environment where it's comfortable for you to say, oh, I'm gonna work part time, because that's fine. Or I have to pick up my kid from daycare at 4, which means I have to leave early, but then I can finish up my day after
Mm.
that. Having that kind of environment is probably it's something that you can't buy.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And having a boss and a culture and a team of people at the top that understand that is really important.
And so therefore, have you had thoughts yourself about family, or are you just very career oriented at the moment?
I have had thoughts about family. Um, I don't think that's going to happen as soon as now. Yeah, maybe in the future. I think for now it's very much let's focus on the career. Let's do all of that,
Mm,
and we'll get to that. But yeah, no rush. Let's say that.
yeah, I think certainly your kind of age, there is no rush, but I think it is really tricky for women to figure out what comes when and how, because when you are striving to build a career, you kind of have to be focused on that first.
Yeah, it's tricky. The clocks don't line up in that way. Um,
Exactly. But do you find that, like, at your age, there's an awareness of that? Because certainly when I was your age, um, because I was not surrounded by any women at all, I didn't have these conversations with myself because I was too busy trying to fit in with a bunch of guys. So, I was like, motherhood, families, like, I absolutely cannot be thinking about that right now. I've got to be one of the boys.
yeah, for me, I wouldn't say it's like that. But I would say definitely I do have friends that talk about that. I'm actually a gay woman, so that all works in a very different way for me. And even kind
Right.
of planning that as well is yeah, it's just something. I think the most important thing is you might say you're ready for this, but having that financial plan in place and also being at the level
Mm,
where mentally you feel that yeah, it's you can kind of raise a child is really important. And I think now most of
mm,
my friends who are in relationships and are maybe settling down or thinking of settling down or some people are panicking that they haven't found someone yet. It's more of everyone realizes that you have to it has to come from the inside out, so you have to be stable first.
right.
And like
Totally.
living in a city like London where things are expensive and you contemplate, you move out of London, you live in London, how do you is the air even fresh in London for children to inhale? You think about all these things, so it's like it's one of those things where you just kind of take it as it comes. And yeah, when the timing is right, when the partner is right, when the funds are right, that's really important, although people don't always like to acknowledge that. Then
Mm.
yeah, everything will fall into place. There's no rush really.
Well, it just seems like you have such a strong sense of being present and just focused on what's important to you for now. And that
Yeah,
seems to be your guiding light. And I must say, it's just been so fascinating listening to your wisdom for someone so young. I can't believe it. What an old soul. Um,
you're also a very old one.
yeah.
Yeah,
No, thank you so much for sharing your truth on Silence. It's been an absolute
Hmm.
privilege to have you on the show.
Yeah, definitely loved it.
That's it from my STEM guest this week. My goodness, I have not heard from someone so young with so much self acceptance and self awareness as my guest this week. It's been truly inspiring to hear someone so calm and collected about who they are. I feel that her serenity has kind of rubbed off on me this over this hour. There's something so enlightening about being in the company of someone who just is very comfortable in their own skin. Thank you so much for listening this week. Don't forget to rate and review the show, and catch you next week on Silence.